Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, last night marked a decisive turning point in the war. Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, which is the world's largest natural gas reserve, and this attack has triggered the most dangerous phase of escalation yet. The strike targeted Iran's economic lifeline. Tehran's response was immediate and expansive. It responded with missile and drone attacks, along with threats and disruptions spread across multiple countries in the region, including Israel and key Gulf economies such as Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain and Oman. But even as the conflict widened, the most telling shift came from Washington. US President Donald Trump publicly distanced from Israel's strike, saying that the US knew nothing and described Israel as having violently lashed out. At the same time, Trump also pointed out that the US could massively strike if South Pars if Iran, in fact, targets Qatar again. But what does Donald Trump's message mean? Is he pushing Israel under the bus as the war escalates? But this is not the first time that US and Israel have had a disagreement during this war. But how much is this forever war costing the United States? It seems the figure is a whopping $200 billion as the war enters its third week. Let's take a look at the figures that are thus entailed. Now, the first aspect is the $200 billion that, in fact, the US is talking about. This is just the tip of the iceberg because the first day alone took $779 million US dollars. The first week, $11.3 billion in just munitions. In the third week, now Pentagon's talking about $200 billion, and after President Trump said so, now Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of War, says that it could be north of $200 billion as well. And Pentagon, of course, as I just mentioned, has sought $200 billion in additional funding for the war. In fact, Pete Hegseth says this number can increase. He says it takes money to kill bad guys. Listen in.
$200 billion. I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future, ensure that our ammunition everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond.
There's big breaking news coming in from Israel as Iran targets the Haifa refinery. Power outage across multiple areas of Haifa following the direct Iranian missile strike on the refinery. Mayank is joining us from Tel Aviv for more on this. Mayank, what can you tell us about this particular strike? How badly has Haifa been hit? Because this is a port where India also has strategic interests, given that Indian companies have been involved there.
It's a strategic port as far as Israel is concerned. And a billow of smoke was seen around 1 hour back that side. And it becomes a major symbolic messaging from every side. And Iran does the same by hitting that base. In a way, it is also expansion of major targets and embroiling the masses in a larger manner, because it comes on the national security of every region which is involved in the warfare right now, which can be Israel, US and Iran together. And as you had rightly brought out, all 6-7 countries within the region, they have seen their energy infrastructure hit in so many ways. So it is going to greatly cost everyone, and we have to see how people are now going to react, because it is beyond the targets of military, whether defensive or offensive.
All right, man, thanks so much for joining us with that quick update on ground. But one thing that we can tell you very clearly is that this war has upended global financial and energy markets, raising concerns of a potential global economic crisis, even at the threat of a recession. As of tonight, Brent crude is priced at $111 per barrel, while prices of refined products, and in a major policy shift of the US, the United States is now considering easing sanctions on Iranian oil that's already stranded at the sea. Can you believe it? Iran, which is oil which has been sanctioned, many countries stopped buying that oil, including India, and now US is talking about unsanctioning that oil. Why? Because of its own strikes that have disrupted the flow of energy into different parts of the world, and now threatens to actually hugely impact on the prices. On the other hand, let's take a look at what India is really doing, because India is securing its energy supplies through Russia and reducing its dependence on the Gulf oil. We're looking at a China-bound Russian tanker that's now been diverted, a move that could have wide-ranging implications for the country's crude supply and energy security. Let's break down what this means for India as well, where India is accelerating energy diversification, about 70% of crude now coming from outside of the Gulf. Russian oil can help mitigate the supply chain disruptions. It reduces vulnerability to supply shocks and reinforces India's control over its energy security. Debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let me introduce our panelists. With us this evening is Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Senior Fellow of the IPCS. Dr. Zoreh Kharazmi is Assistant Professor of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Darrell G. Kimball is Executive Director of the Arms Control Association. Steve Gill is the Republican leader. We have also with us Major General Yaakov Amidror, former National Security Advisor of Israel. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And let me start with you first. Steve Gill, what does one make of the U.S. policy? Because, you know, by all admissions, the U.S. clearly did not expect this kind of a backlash from Iran. President Trump himself said so, and then, of course, backtracked later. No surprises there. But what are we looking at? Iranian crude has been sanctioned by the U.S. for so long. And now, after striking all of the refineries, after disrupting global crude supply, you're actually unsanctioning Iranian oil that's stuck in the Persian Gulf. This just shows the complete lack of foresight or planning on part of the United States. Sorry to say that, but that's the reality, and that's how the world's looking at it.
Well, I think that the world's looking at it the wrong way. I mean, keep in mind that the U.S. has been very careful not to destroy the refineries, not to destroy the infrastructure in Iran, because President Trump's strategy is to make sure that you remove their capacity to develop and use nuclear weapons, diminish their ability to, strike their neighbors, which they are showing they certainly would have done if they had had nukes, and to reduce their capacity to engage in terrorism around the world. He wants to make sure that the new regime in Iran has access to the oil resources. I think that's why you're seeing Karj Island attacked, but not destroyed and obliterated. That would completely disrupt the Iranian oil and would have a bigger impact on the world.
What about South Pars? What about the attacks on Tehran, which turned the sky black? What were those?
I'm sorry?
What about the attacks on the South Pars field, which has disrupted global supply of natural gas? What about the attacks on Tehran itself, which turned the sky black for days? What were those attacks, sir?
Well, I think that's why you've seen President Trump say that Israel acted out of anger and that no more further attacks will be done there. But keep in mind, the largest provider of natural gas is the U.S. I mean, this is also a benefit economically to the U.S. But keep in mind, there's a great irony to the fact that Trump is now diverting Iranian oil to use those resources and that oil against the Iranian regime. And just now we found that President Trump's strategy is working, as the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and others have said, okay, yeah, despite denying we would get involved yesterday, today we're going to get involved in clearing the Hormuz Strait. So President Trump's strategy is working, not just militarily, but economically as well.
President Trump's strategy is working militarily and economically, but Major General Yaakov, here's the problem. United States says that it's the Israeli government or the Israeli army and forces that have gone rogue, that they're not listening to us.
I didn't see that they are not listening to us. I think it is additional words of you. Well, they said that it was not coordinated. We insist that it was coordinated between our people and the Americans on the other side. I don't know if the president knew about it. He says that he doesn't, so I believe him. But what we have is a coordinated attack between us and the Americans. Maybe a mistake, I don't know, someone made. But, when you fight to destroy a state which promised to kill you, and made strategy of the last 50 years in which they build nuclear missiles and proxies forces just to destroy Israel, in such a world, if from time to time you make a mistake, I think that it's not so bad.
No, but you know, this is the exact quote of President Trump. I'm reading out from his Truth Social post. He says, Israel, out of anger for what is taking place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pass gas field. Relatively small section has been hit. US knew nothing about this particular attack, and the country of Qatar was in no way, shape or form involved with it, nor did have any idea it was going to happen. No more attacks will be made at Israel pertaining to this extremely important and valuable South Pass field unless Iran unwisely decides to attack a very innocent, in this case, Qatar. So this is the President of the United States saying that United States itself knew nothing. Where was it coordinated with that?
We insist that it was coordinated, not with the White House, of course, between the professionals in our side and their side. That will be investigated. If someone made a mistake in our side, on the American side, we will correct it. And we will continue to work together. We did it during the whole war, and we'll continue to do it in the future, even if one mistake was done either by us or by the Americans.
Daryl Kimball, what do you make of this explanation? What does one believe? Because Israel is saying something quite different from what the United States public position is. I understand in war, people take certain positions that suit their own political and other interests, but this is quite bizarre. You're fighting the war together, yet there's no communication to diametrically opposite versions coming from US and Israel.
Well, I think there is communication, there is coordination. This is a joint Israeli war, but what's clear is that Prime Minister Netanyahu's goals are not exactly the same as President Trump's goals. President Trump's objectives keep changing. They are not clear. This was a war of choice. Iran's nuclear program did not represent an imminent threat. Its missiles were a threat, but only if Iran was attacked, and they have been attacked. So what we see here with these strikes on the gas fields is the inevitable escalation of this war into a regional conflict. And I think what American and Israeli analysts and leaders have to do is they need to be a lot more humble about the realities of how war can take a course that you did not expect before. Clearly, President Trump and his team underestimated Iran's capability to strike back and to effectively shut down the Straits of Hormuz. So I think what we're witnessing here is the inevitable miscommunication that does take place. These are not minor mistakes. My Israeli friend, these are major mistakes. The gas flow to Europe and elsewhere is going to be severely affected. The price hike is going to affect people's lives. This is a conflict that Israel and the United States started that has global ramifications on countries. I think they're guilty of creating a great deal of unnecessary chaos.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Zorek Harazmi as well. Dr. Zorek Harazmi, I'd like you to come in on this because, you have US and Israel on the one side which are blaming each other, but what is Iran going to do? Because if Iran furthers the escalation, Iran, of course, has been hitting back at Israel and the neighborhood, of course, in the Middle East. What are we looking at in terms of the future from here?
Yes, actually, there is no difference between the United States and Israel or even their complicit regimes in the region. What's running on is a chaotic mess in the region, and Iran is persistently saying that all escalations would be appropriately responded as it responded yesterday. And maybe it was a test. It was a test to see that how far Iran goes. And Iran indicates that it's determined to go far to finish it. So it's the survival question, and Iran is ready for a prolonged war, I think.
Iran is ready for a prolonged war, but just look at the kind of statements coming in, Abhijit, from Pete Hegseth. He says that we won't want to set a definitive time frame on, he's also seeking $200 billion. Is this just positioning from the US's part, that they're ready to go for the long haul in case this war drags on, and clearly shows that this is not something they had accounted for or planned for?
Look, right from the get-go, Madhav, if you remember the last campaign, Rising Lion, in June last year, was very well planned. This one, right from the get-go, has been clumsy. It has been a clown show, and it has been a narrative disaster from the get-go. And I think the differential here is the fact that the Americans got involved with very intangible end results that we don't know about. Now, there was a panelist who just said, oh, you know, it's going to plan and everything like that. That's not the way to think. Well, I'm sorry, you don't tell us how we think. We have our own cost-benefit analysis and you have yours. You can't impose the price of your actions onto us, and we have absolutely no obligation. Now, this war that the Israelis and Americans have started has made gas untenable for us. It has made our oil supplies untenable. It has put 10 million Indians in harm's way in the Gulf. And if we're just meant to sit around and clap and, you know, admire the great perspicacity and intellect of the Americans going around in what is a cluster clown show, I'm sorry, it's not happening. I think it is high time that they started seeing what kind of costs they're imposing on other countries and start adjusting their strategy accordingly, because right now it is not going to plan.
Steve Gill, you want to respond to that? I think that's a direct question, or does response to what you just said.
Yeah, I don't know how you can describe a military clown show 3 weeks into the operation that has completely decimated the Iranian Navy, completely decimated their capacity to control their airspace, completely eradicated their leadership, 40, 50, 60 down. Payday comes up, by the way, May 21st in Iran. How are they going to pay the Basij thugs on the streets? How are they going to pay their soldiers? How are they going to continue to pay to keep the Iranian people down? Man, if this is a clown show, I don't know what circuses my friends are going to, because this has been an unparalleled military success.
Isn't it a fact that the U.S. bases all across the Middle East have been hit? Infrastructure everywhere has been hit. Aeroplanes have been hit, including the F-35 and the mid-air refuelers. So clearly, of course, you've not been able to hit Iran's ability to strike back at either U.S. or Israel.
Madhav.
It's being eradicated day by day. We just saw a $5,000 bunker, or 5,000-pound bunker buster hit the area that they used to target the Straits of Hormuz. Again, we're 3 weeks into this conflict.
Okay.
Did they have the capacity to strike some strikes?
This is the latest official update. I'm sorry for interrupting you. There's an official update coming in on the F-35. It's made an emergency landing. Iran has hit a U.S. F-35 fighter jet. It's made an emergency landing, and we're told that this particular pilot is in a stable condition. So this is a fresh escalation coming in. We've seen, not for the first time, F-35 has been hit, Abhijit, and this is, you know, just goes to show that Iran and its firepower, whatever Israel and US may say that they've taken down launchers, is pretty much intact.
Look, they can hit as many, I don't care if they hit 1 F-35 or 10 F-35s. Iran is getting hammered. Let us be very clear about this. The problem here is that the gentleman doesn't seem to have read Clausewitz. Victory in war is political. The Tet Offensive was an absolute disaster for the North Vietnamese, and yet the Tet Offensive ended up breaking American will to fight. Victory in war is political, full stop. They can down 10 F-35s, they're still going to get hammered. Iran is getting hammered. Let us be very, very clear. Iran is being devastated at the moment. That is not the point. Victory is where you have broken their mental capacity to think of it as victory. This is the whole problem. They killed more people. This is like saying, oh, well, you know, Germany killed more Russians than Russians killed Germans. Heck, I don't remember seeing the flag, the Nazi flag over the Kremlin. It was rather the Soviet flag over the Reichstag. They killed 3 million Vietnamese for just 50,000. Who won the Vietnam War?
Major General Yakov, you want to respond to that?
Kind of goalpost shifting and, you know, selective reading of what victory is.
Yeah.
All Iran has to do.
I think it's very clear that if Trump gets an off-ramp, he'd want to do so immediately. But you want to respond to that, Major General Yakov, because there are some serious concerns about the damage that this is causing. Yes, you might be hurting Iranian interests. Yes, Iranian infrastructure, civilians, military personnel may be losing their lives over a period of time. But the point is, what about the cost that it's imposing on the rest of the world?
Let's begin with facts. Someone said that the Iranians are using the missiles only for defense. You don't remember, but during 24 and 25, the Iranian launched more than 500 missiles into Israel before Israel made even one attack on the Iranians. So I don't know where he find this notion that the Iranians prepare the missiles only for defense. About the nuclear issue, yes, they didn't have yet nuclear capability, but when they will have it, it will be too late, and they should be stopped before they have it. And after we brought the archive of the Iranians into Israel, and you can read what was written there, you understand that the Iranians are made all the efforts to have at least, at the first stage, 5 nuclear bombs that Israel could not allow to happen. And we are very sorry that other countries are paying the price. We will not let Iran to have nuclear capability, if the economy of the world will be in a very huge problems. For us to exist, to live, and to continue to flourish is more important than the price of the oil, with all the respect to the price of the oil.
Let's talk about the nuclear issue for just a moment, please, because I think it is important to understand that just before the U.S. and Israel launched these attacks, there were talks between the Iranians and the president's Middle East advisor. That was ostensibly the reason why the Trump administration launched this attack. The reality is that Iran's nuclear program, which is substantial, is not going to be bombed away. You cannot bomb nuclear know-how away. The material, the highly enriched uranium that was buried underground after the June 2025 strikes, is still there. This attack is going to reinforce the view of hardliners in Iran that they may need to pursue a secret nuclear weapons program. I would also just note that Iran was not an imminent nuclear threat. We have in the past achieved progress in blocking Iran's pathways to the bomb through the 2015 Iran deal, which Israel unfortunately opposed at every turn.
Yeah,
so
and that's what came out of the talks. That's what the Oman foreign minister, if I believe, has also said. Daryl, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. Another update coming in. This is Donald Trump. He said that the entire Iranian leadership is gone. And in a striking remark, he's also said that US can take Kharg Island anytime we want. So, Dr. Zoré, the big question is this, that these strikes, without doubt, as Abhijit said, are causing huge amount of devastation in Iran. Yes, the regime may be fighting back, but it's going to be lacking a whole lot of leaders and faces. And the big question is, the fact that all of this impact is ultimately going to hurt not just Iran, but also the whole world in the process, the manner in which the neighbors of Iran are being struck by Iran.
You see, just removing individuals, if you just remember the assassination of the former supreme leader and assassination of others that are intellectual, that are really efficient people like Dr. Larijani, for example, has indicated that these people, they're very valuable, but would be very soon replaced with the new ones. And Iran has a very sophisticated state and constitution that with removing individuals with the dirty hands of the Israelis would not fail. And look at Joe Kent resigning because the Americans' intelligence service well understood that the strategic defeat of the United States has already happened. And I think that some of the guests just having some illusions about the regime change, about uprisings of people, about Trump's actually illusions and ignorant ideas about Iran doesn't work in the battleground. The battleground is that Fatah and Khorramshahr openly flying over Tel Aviv and Haifa, and all the defense actually and interception systems in the GCC and Israel is already depleted with the first generations of Iranian missiles.
Okay. Steve Gill, I want you to respond to that. The point is this. One is that she says you take out one set of leaders, another set of leaders are going to come in. And ultimately, there has to be someone in the regime that you talk to. If you're going to keep taking out all the leaders, who will you talk to?
Well, first of all, I played college basketball, and I can tell you the first team starters were better than I was. So at some point, you get to the second team, the third team, the junior varsity, and we may be in trying to just grab somebody from the stands to play for Iran at this point as the top leadership, both in terms of their military leadership, their intelligence, and those that are running their terrorists on the streets in Tehran. Once they're wiped out, it's an issue. And I am so glad that one of my fellow panelists acknowledges that Iran has been pursuing nuclear weapons because the Iranians keep denying that. We're just looking for nuclear power. You don't bury your nuclear power development 300 meters under Rock Mountain. So you can't negotiate with people you cannot trust. So yeah, they might have been talking right before this strike came, but you can't trust them.
Daryl wants to
And we
respond
failed
here.
every time we've negotiated.
Quick response, Daryl. We are out of time. 30-second response, please.
We have negotiated with the Iranians successfully. Donald Trump pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. That is the proximal cause for Iran building up its uranium enrichment capabilities and reducing their IAEA access. So that is just false, Steve, that we cannot negotiate on this issue.
Okay, let's leave it there for the moment. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Dr. Zorek Harazmi, as well as Daryl Kimball, Steve Gill, Major General Yakov Amidror, thanks so much for joining us this evening.